Hello folks, welcome back to another marvelous anime video. In Kentaro Miura's seminal dark fantasy series Berserk, evil takes many forms. While the primary agents of causality and evil are the demonic Godhand and the apostles, some of the most heinous individuals that populate this realm are mere mortals. From kings to priests, Berserk shows us the many places in which evil lurks within the hearts of men. Kentaro Miura's masterwork reveals the depths of depravity that individuals are capable of sinking to, driven by cruelty, ambition, and ego on par with or even surpassing that shown by the monstrous agents of causality. These flawed individuals are shaped by the brutal and unforgiving evil that governs this world and are more than just mere caricatures of a villain. Whether they're corrupt nobles, fanatical clergy, cruel mercenaries, or betrayers of trust, their deeds drive home the harsh truth that lies at the heart of Berserk, that the true horror often lies not in the supernatural, but in the choices people make when driven by fear, desire, or despair. Through these characters, Miura provides a mirror that reflects the darkest corners of the human soul, challenging his audience to confront the capacity for evil that exists within humanity itself. The fact that the acts committed by these individuals lack any direct supernatural cause makes them even more terrifying, as they're grounded in our own reality. While there's no dearth of evil mortals in Berserk, we'll be focusing on 6 individuals that we consider to be the most heinous of them all. These are the absolute worst of the worst, who, in most cases, occupy positions of trust and power that they grossly abuse, leading to the suffering of many. We won't be including the likes of the Snake Baron or Wild because even if it is heavily hinted that they might have been evil before their ascension, there's little to no knowledge about their foul deeds as mortals. So, without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the dreary world of Berserk, where the blood of the innocents has long blurred the line between monster and man. Let's begin. Father Mosgus. One of the most terrifying and evil characters in all of Berserk isn't an apostle or a member of the Godhand, but just a regular human being. Father Mosgus is a High Inquisitor who serves the Holy See. The primary antagonist of the Conviction arc, Mosgus is an extremist zealot who enjoys inflicting pain and suffering in the name of his faith. We're initially introduced to him when he's attacked by a group of people on the way to the Tower of Conviction. These people were villagers whose entire village had been tortured and put to death by Mosgus for the crime of restocking their own food supply rather than donating it to the church. Despite this heinous act, Mosgus appears almost puzzled as to why the villagers are attacking him. However, fury is unleashed when one of the villagers declares that God will punish him for his atrocities. The enraged Mosgus kills the individual by smashing his skull in with the holy book he always carries, declaring that only the Holy See has the right to pronounce God's will. He then goes on to order the execution of the remaining rebels through the breaking wheel. This horrific torture results in the slow and excruciatingly painful death of the victim. A giant of a man, Mosgus had convinced himself that all of his heinous acts were sanctified by the fact that they were done in the name of God. Within the Tower of Conviction, he leads the unfortunate souls chosen by him to be tortured and maimed in the most horrific and inhumane manner possible. Aiding him in these sadistic pursuits is his band of loyal followers, composed of deformed, mutated misfits that he saved from the streets that serve him without any question. The sickening part about Mosgus is that his brand of divine purification did not distinguish between man or woman, and even children weren't spared from it. This disgusting human being claimed that everything he was doing was so that the souls of these unfortunate individuals would be spared, and what made it worse was the fact that he truly believed this to be the case. He considered the tortures to be a trial of sorts that a pure soul would be able to overcome. However, it is clear that the fiends who conducted these acts under his command clearly enjoyed it, and it was far more than just an act of ritualistic purification. When Farnace is unable to continue looking at these gruesome acts, she turns her gaze away. Mosgus forces her to watch, stating that this too was an aspect of the Holy See that she must accept. We see him taking a poor mother to her doom, praising her for her courage and wishing her well for the trial that lay ahead, even as the horrified woman is frozen with fear at the sight before her. Mosgus and his cronies imply a variety of medieval torture methods like the breaking wheel and the Iron Maiden, just to name a few, in order to punish the heretics. After years of prostration, during which he slammed his face and knees to the floor, Mosgus's face became almost flat and smooth, giving him an extremely eerie appearance. From his creepy face to the various sadistic acts he performs, Mosgus represents the terror of blind religious fanaticism, which allows the justification of any atrocity. Mosgus's character takes heavy inspiration from real-world zealotry and the church inquisitions that killed numerous people suspected of being heretics and witches. Unlike the apostles, for whom many of their pure intentions were twisted into something evil, Mosgus was always like this, even as a human. Father Mosgus is one of the most evil characters in all of Berserk, not because of his magic or pseudo-apostle transformation later on, but because he embodies the evil that lurks beneath the mask of righteousness and good. Daiba! From a deranged clergyman to a court sorcerer, let's now talk about another human who could easily rival the evil of Mosgus. Daiba is the Grand Sorcerer of the Kushan Empire. As his station warrants, he's an extremely powerful practitioner of magic, particularly well-versed in the study of the astral plane and the control of animals and other creatures. Unlike the zealots of the Holy See, who even refuse to acknowledge the existence of magic, Daiba approaches it with a scientific tenacity. While his alignment is not chaotic evil, Daiba has shown little to no regard for human life if it meant furthering his own knowledge and Ganishka's ambitions. He's the leader of the Pisachagana, a group of Kushan wizards that control animals that have been transformed into monstrosities after being infused remotely by the energy from the astral plane. They form an integral part of Ganishka's army, as most foes simply cannot contend with their monstrous strength. He's also the one responsible for giving Emperor Ganishka the Behelit, which he eventually uses to transform into an apostle. On the topic of creating apostles, Daiba is responsible for creating one of the most diabolical artifacts in all of Berserk. He's the mastermind behind the Demon Womb, also known as the man-made Behelit. This infernal object had been created by stitching together the live bodies of countless apostles to form a cauldron of sorts, which was then filled with amniotic fluids. Into this vessel, pregnant women were dropped, causing the fetus inside their bodies to be corrupted by the evil from the astral plane. These fetuses would mature rapidly before clawing themselves out of their mother's womb, killing the woman in the process. These pseudo-apostles were called the Daka and formed the bulk of Ganishka's infernal legions. The sheer amount of Daka present in Ganishka's army paints a grim picture about the number of women that had been sacrificed thanks to Daiba. Unlike Mosgus, Daiba is not governed by any particular emotion. His age comes with endless wisdom and cunning that have served him well. As the old saying goes, beware of old men in a profession where men die young. Those who underestimate Daiba do so at their peril. The King of Midland. The King of Midland is initially introduced to us as a noble and graceful leader who's fighting a righteous battle against the invading Tudors. The benevolence and faith he shows towards Griffith and the Band of the Hawk, despite them being lowborn, really elevates the king's character in terms of honor and wisdom. While the rest of the established aristocracy doubted and looked down upon the upstarts, the king elevated their social status, showering them with countless rewards and titles. He dubbed the Band of the Hawk the White Phoenix Knights and their leader, Griffith, the White Phoenix General. So, for all intents and purposes, this nameless King of Midland was built up to be the ideal ruler. His virtue was unshakable as he wasn't swayed by things like the station of one's birth. However, things quickly spiral out of control when Griffith begins to experience a mental breakdown following Guts' departure from the Band of the Hawk. Losing his usual cool and composed demeanor, the captain of the Band of the Hawk beds the Princess of Midland, Charlotte, taking her virginity. When the king finds out about this, he flies into a rage, banishing the Band of the Hawk while sentencing their leader, Griffith, to the most heinous torture imaginable. While this might seem quite justified to some as an act by a king and a father, the shocking revelation made not long after really subverts all expectations. It's revealed that the King of Midland's judgment regarding the fate of Griffith and the Band of the Hawk wasn't driven by his feelings of outrage and betrayal as a father and a king, but by his own lustful and incestuous desires towards Charlotte, his own daughter. Miura displays this stark change in the king's moral alignment through his art, as Midland's ruler no longer appears kingly and regal. He is instead portrayed as a wild and frantic madman whose facade of regality shatters, revealing his true self, a frail and insecure, incestuous madman. As if harboring such inappropriate thoughts towards his own daughter wasn't enough, he actually sexually assaults Charlotte in a delirious frenzy, berating her for sleeping with Griffith. Unlike characters like Griffith and Grunbeld, whose descent into evil can be categorized as a fall from grace, ironically, the King of Midland is below such labels. Charlotte's chastity was the anchor that held up the king's facade, and it all came tumbling down the moment Griffith violated his coveted prize. Unlike the two, He was always evil, and it was born out of his own fragile ego, which was so easily corrupted by this immense power he possessed as king. The King of Midland's character highlights the dangers of having weak individuals in positions of power, as they are easily seduced by the temptations it offers. Unlike the evil of Griffith and the Apostles, the King of Midland's evil is characterized by very human emotions like jealousy, lust, and an obsession for control. Gambino! The first true betrayal in Guts' life was at the hands of a man who served as a father figure to him. After being picked up by a band of mercenaries led by a man named Gambino, Guts would spend much of his early life in their company. Unknown to the young boy, Gambino had actually been against rescuing him after he was found by a woman called Shisu under his mother's corpse. Gambino had considered him an ill omen from the outset and had only relented due to his soft spot for Shisu. However, when Shisu dies of a mysterious illness a few years later, the superstitious mercenary doesn't waste any time blaming the young boy for it. Despite secretly harboring a grudge, he never reveals it outwardly. In fact, he even teaches the young boy to wield the sword, almost taking on the role of a surrogate father. However, one day, on the night of Guts' first battle, he's ambushed and raped by a brutish member of the gang named Donovan. This monster tells Guts that it was Gambino who had sold him for a few silver coins. Even though Guts manages to exact his revenge on Donovan later, he's unable to bring himself to believe that Gambino would betray him in such a manner. Things finally come to a head when Gambino loses a leg during battle, causing him to effectively retire from combat. In a world where might is right, Gambino's injury basically means that he would also lose control of the group eventually, as a wounded or aged lion is swiftly removed as the leader of the pride. Unable to cope with his injury and situation, the old mercenary lashes out at Guts, who had been hoping for some kind of praise and reward for his performance on the battlefield. The wounded old warrior rushes the boy with the intent to kill him, spewing venom and vitriol in his direction. Gambino confirms Donovan's claims that he had indeed sold Guts to the fiend, which absolutely shatters the young boy. Despite the circumstances, he had truly trusted Gambino and thought of him as a father figure. With no other choice, Guts is forced to kill Gambino, leading him to be hounded by his ex-comrades. While technically, Donovan's assault on Guts is the first act of betrayal, we believe that Gambino is the one who betrays Guts in the first place, as without his consent, Donovan wouldn't have assaulted Guts. Thanks to Gambino's treachery, Guts is scarred for life, as he suffers no one's touch for the longest time. It's only after meeting Casca and Shirke that he seems to overcome this trauma a bit. While mercenaries are no paragons of virtue and justice, Gambino is truly evil for literally allowing the rape of somebody who considered him a father. He causes almost irreparable harm to Guts' psyche. The evil of Gambino is personal and emotionally scarring, not because of power or ambition, but because of what it represents: the betrayal of a father figure and the abuse of a child who had nobody else. There is no supernatural excuse to justify his betrayal and commodification of a young boy who looked up to him. It's simply rooted in superstition, bitterness, and jealousy, which makes it even more grounded and terrifying. King Giserich. Having already spoken about two evil and weak rulers, now let's talk about somebody who is actually strong and powerful. King Giserich, also known as the Skull King, is a mythical figure in the Berserk lore. He's said to have been so powerful that he united the entire continent under one rule. He achieved this by waging a bloody war which saw the deaths of thousands of soldiers and innocents alike. It's said that he made the rivers run red with blood to quench his thirst for domination. It is said that he was a cruel and merciless king and an unmatched warrior who ruled with an iron fist. He's the ruler who created a large capital city named Midland, symbolizing a land in the middle of the continent. According to Mosgus, while his people languished in poverty and suffering, Giserich lived in luxury, indulging in all manner of hedonistic pleasures. Much of what is known about this legendary tyrant is from a fable called The Legend of King Giserich. According to this tale, Giserich had imprisoned a pious saint within the Tower of Conviction, where he continued to profess the king's sins despite being tortured mercilessly. This continued until one day, angered by his actions, 5 angels descended upon Giserich's kingdom, wiping it out from the very annals of history. While the truth behind Giserich's character is buried within religious dogma and the sands of time, what little is known about him paints him as evil incarnate. If you read between the lines of his story carefully, along with the visions that Guts sees of the previous owner of the Berserker armor, it seems that what Giserich did was trigger an eclipse where his entire empire, or at least the people in Midland, were used as sacrifices. Considering the fact that it is heavily implied that the Skull Knight is Giserich, it looks highly unlikely that he was the one meant to ascend, meaning that it wasn't really him triggering the eclipse. However, he undoubtedly had a large role to play in the chain of events leading to that infernal ritual. We know that Skull Knight is an entity driven by rage and vengeance, but could it also mean that he's driven by a desire to make amends for all his cruelty in his past life as well? Until we're given any explicit details, for now, taking into account all that we know, Giserich was definitely one of the most evil and cruel rulers and humans in all of Berserk. Due to his ancient nature, his evil is not explicitly stated, but instead inferred through ancient religious texts, ruins, and distorted memories. Giserich's evil is tied to the same sin Griffith commits, using others as pawns to reach a dream, only to be consumed by it. The evil that he represents is a mirror of Berserk's greatest theme, ambition, as well as its consequences. Grand Duke Hakon. The Grand Duchy of Grant, which was an island nation in the northern frontier, was ruled by a feeble and paranoid ruler called Grand Duke Hakon. As the fame and popularity of the great flame dragon knight Grunbeld, who was still human at this point, begins to grow, Hakon becomes increasingly jealous of the mightiest warrior in his kingdom. This jealousy soon turns into a full-blown murderous paranoia when he discovers that his wife desires to bed Grunbeld in order to bear his child. However, Grunbeld was an honorable warrior, and having suffered for countless years under Tudor rule, he was firmly devoted to Grant and its people, defending them with the ferociousness of a dragon. Although Grant was a tiny nation constantly threatened by the Tudor Empire and its neighbors, through the valor of Grunbeld and his flame dragon knights, its borders were kept safe. However, due to the constant onslaught of the Tudors mixed with Hakon's envy towards Grunbeld, the ruler makes a deal with the Tudors to sell out his own country in exchange for being allowed to retain his power as a vassal of the Tudors. He begins to plot a method of removing Grunbeld, who was the biggest obstacle in his path to achieving this goal. By killing Grunbeld, not only would he be able to guarantee the success of his deal with the Tudor, but also rid himself of the man who made his soul burn with such envy and fear. In order to do this, he begins to manipulate one of Grunbeld's best friends, Edvard, who also happens to be his own son. Now, Edvard, despite having a close bond with Grunbeld in their childhood, had long resented being in the shadow of the flame dragon. He also begrudged Sigurd's love for Grunbeld, as he harbored an unrequited love for her. This made him a prime target for his father's manipulations to set him against his own friend. The Duke plays on his son's emotions by announcing Grunbeld's marriage to the Duchess while at the same time arranging Sigurd's wedding elsewhere. This makes it appear to Edvard and the rest of the citizens that Hakon had chosen Grunbeld over his own son as his heir, while for Edvard, not only would he be losing his rightful place on the throne, but he would also have his mother wed his friend while losing out on Sigurd forever. This sends Edvard into a full-blown mental crisis, which only gets worse due to what happens next. The Duchess, not standing on ceremony, tries to seduce and bed Grunbeld, who escapes from the situation before things can escalate further. Unfortunately, the Count orchestrates the events in such a manner that Edvard learns of what his mother intends to do and bursts into her room to find her naked. Not knowing that Grunbeld had left without copulating, seeing his naked mother's body shatters what little mental health he had remaining as he proceeds to murder the Duchess. Not expecting his son to have been capable of matricide, the evil Hakon accepts Edvard to be truly of his blood after his son proves him wrong. Together, they plot with an old Tudor commander who had once held Edvard, Sigurd, and Grunbeld captive to kill the former. Edvard is promised Sigurd and his position as an heir as a reward for his participation. Together, the evil men under the leadership of Hakon begin to spin a web of deceit and betrayal strong enough to trap the great flame dragon. Feeding his friend false information about a Tudor attack, Edvard convinces Grunbeld to lead a force of 1,000 men to what was supposed to be a mere skirmish. However, what awaits Grunbeld is a force of over 20,000 Tudor men. Despite these odds, he manages to win a Pyrrhic victory and, sensing that something was amiss, rushes back, where he is met by Benedicte, his female companion, and Sigurd, who are both mortally wounded. It's here that the full extent of Hakon's evil plan and betrayal comes to light before Grunbeld. Having had a sense of dread and misgiving, he had asked Sigurd to protect Benedicte while he was away on his campaign. No sooner had he left than Edvard had arrived with a large force, plundering Benedicte's temple, raping and murdering the women who dwelt there. The two women had almost managed to escape the chaos when Edvard changed his mind regarding taking them alive and decided to shoot them. As this tale of betrayal is recounted by the two to Grunbeld, he's surrounded on all sides by Tudor forces and Edvard's men. Even then, Grunbeld made the enemy pay dearly, cutting a bloody swath through his foes to the point that some of the men even began doubting whether they could bring down the Great Flame Dragon. Mighty as he was, however, Grunbeld was still merely a mortal, and he began to grow weary, having just fought a massive battle not long ago, along with being forced to protect Sigurd and Benedicte at the same time. Despite the two women being on the verge of death, Edvard attempts to rape them, showing us just how far he's fallen. Eventually, unable to sustain his defense, Grunbeld activates his Behelit on the behest of Benedicte and sacrifices the two women, becoming the apostle that we know him to be. He goes on to slay Edvard and the entire Tudor army before proceeding to kill Hakon, forever ending his treacherous ways. Hakon is another example of the dangers of having frail men in power, just like the King of Midland. He's paranoid, jealous, and downright evil, as he doesn't think twice about using his own son and wife to further his nefarious schemes. While Edvard is equally worthy of being on this list, he was largely manipulated by his father, and one cannot talk about the other without mentioning them both in their stories. For self-preservation, he's willing to sacrifice not just his family, but all of the people who depend on his rule and guidance. I mean, at least the King of Midland fought the Tudors and won. Meanwhile, Hakon was willing to tuck his tail between his legs and join them, betraying everybody. This makes him not just an evil individual, but a coward to boot. He desecrates the sanctified roles of a ruler, father, and husband, making him a truly despicable and sorry excuse for a human being. He's the one human in Berserk whose heart might truly be blacker than even an apostle, for even they have tragic tales like the one of Grunbeld, which we just recounted. I mean, seriously, how much of a jerk do you have to be the bad guy in an apostle's story? Marvelous verdict! We have to give honorable shoutouts to the likes of Mosgus's evil subordinates, the pagans near the Tower of Conviction, and the courtiers of Midland, including their queen. All of these individuals were no less evil and served to highlight that the decay in human morality was widespread through all walks of life and not just centered around the individuals we mentioned in our video today. While the Godhand and apostles embody horror of the supernatural kind, it's the cruelty, corruption, and moral decay displayed by mortals that leave the deepest scars on the psyche of our characters, but also us, the audience. By highlighting these dark truths, Berserk challenges its audience to confront uncomfortable realities about power, ambition, and the consequences of unchecked desire. Ultimately, the series suggests that while monsters may be born from darkness, it's humans who often choose to become them. These individuals play a central role in the series' exploration of things like suffering, cruelty, and unchecked ego. Miura crafts a brutal world where evil doesn't just exist with the supernatural entities, but lurks within every human heart, showing that it's been deeply internalized into the very fabric of man's nature. This adds yet another layer to the beautifully woven tapestry created by this genius mangaka that we still continue to enjoy to this day. We hope that with this video, we were able to not just increase your knowledge regarding these individuals, but also pique your interest in Berserk as a whole, because honestly, you gotta check it out. Thanks for sticking with us right to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out the rest of our channel where we post daily videos regarding all your favorite animes and manga, including Berserk. With that said, it's time for us to say goodbye. We hope to see you soon in the next one, but until then, stay safe and stay marvelous, fellow strugglers.